Okay, well, I want to welcome everybody tonight to the second American Farriers Journal Q&A, Business Practices. And tonight, two for the price of one. We have Alex Garcia and Shane Westman joining us, two farriers from California. Shane, why don't you tell us a little bit about your practice first?
My current practice, or
yeah, well, let's how you got there too.
Oh, okay. Well, I started shoeing in about 1992 as a means to pay my way through college. Went to a farrier school and immediately started clientele after that, and slowly built it up with no intentions on having it be a career, though it turned into a career. And that was all in Northwest Washington State with a wide variety of horses, the backbone being what I call weekend warriors. Most people call backyard horses. Fiercely loyal bunch with a slant towards therapeutic farriery. And once I decided this was going to be my career, one of my business plan was to be a therapeutic consultation farrier later, which I found out really doesn't work in private practice outside of a clinic or hospital setting. Then in 2016, opportunity came up at UC Davis. The farrier there was retiring out, and I applied and got the job. And so I've been at UC Davis as resident farrier at the teaching hospital for the last about 4 years.
Great. Tell us about your career and practice today, Alex.
So I got going in about 2007. Attended my first clinic, and it took off from there, and I found a lot of interest in it. Was from the Southern California area originally. Had a business down there for over 10 years. A lot of, I would say, weekend warriors, backyard horses, kind of kept me going. Worked a lot on heavy horses, draft breeds. About 4 years ago, I made the jump to come up about a hour east of Sacramento, up in the foothills, and my practice up here is a lot of backyards, and then gotten into a lot of working cow horses, reiners, cutting horses, etc. It's kind of been my interest per se. It's kept me busy. But shoeing, so starting out shoeing, it was started with my farrier when I was in high school, and asked me the question of, well, you thought about doing this? And that wasn't my game plan at all. I was going to enter into either law enforcement or the fire department, and found that shoeing horses was a lot more fun, and I found so much more fulfillment and a joy to work on horses. And it just kept building and building, and it's been good ever since.
Great. Thank you. So I think especially those who were with us last week, having a Hall of Famer, Tom Curl, join us, who started shoeing in 1972. The purpose of this series is to get different perspectives of people at different places in their careers, different types of practices. So we'll be mixing it up each week. So for a first question, let's start with you, Alex. What advice do you have for establishing payment processes with clients, either new clients or trying to convince established clients to change how they pay you?
You're going to work for a lot of different type of people in your industry. I found giving people all the different options is the best possible. There's so many different apps out there. I mean, there's Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. There's the sky's the limit on payment. So it's kind of works for the customer. We want to work, we work for them technically, but you're going to have, still cash and check, which is just fine. I feel it's just fine. But the payment wise, it's just giving them the option. I think it's helpful. Also, if you have customers that have problems paying or trouble paying, one thing that I find is clients that are difficult, maybe setting up a shoeing cycle on the first of the month or the middle of the month or the end of the month. And so it kind of accommodates their checkbook, so that you're still getting the horse done, you're still getting paid, and it makes it easier for everybody. I know it can be harder to do on some horses, and that one client might not line up in your schedule, but just giving them that option, it makes it smoother for everybody. So Shane, can you add to that one?
That was very similar. I always had demanded the payment due at time of service. I had a bit of business background before I started shooting horses in my late teens, early 20s. And in today's day and age, just like you said, there are so many options available. You don't need to be handed cash or checker anymore. It can be almost automatic and very safe. You don't need to be hanging on to credit card numbers. You can do it through a service where everybody's protected.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but collecting on invoices, most businesses have an entire department for that. And it costs quite a bit. You don't realize it until you have to sit down and spend a whole day tracking down, a few $100.
Yes, yeah.
So
the mental capacity to keep track of those invoices, it can be difficult. If there's, I know there's programs to run those invoices, but it's still one more thing to keep track of.
Exactly. And you need to have strict protocols, strict policies if you do take invoice payments. And once again, a lot of owners are absent in barns. I get that. Once again, you can have an automatic payment or chart, invoicing. Have a written policy in place. I think is really important that the client understands and you stick to.
Yeah.
When do you give that written the instructions on payment or policy?
Most of the time in my practice, it's most of the time verbal. There is written policies that I do have. It's just it's something I don't carry with me all the time. At large barns, or if I work for a corporation, I might submit that. But on a small scale, it's verbal most of the time. And you ask that starts off either at the first appointment with that client or on that horse.
What are your thoughts, Shane, on that?
When I did invoice, which was rarely, there had to be a reason that I was allowing to basically take out a short-term loan without me getting an interest on it. And so on my invoice sheet, I had it out. There's a small disclaimer, after a certain amount of time, there's going to be a late penalty, which depends on the state you live in, could be required. You can't collect like a late fee without it being disclosed early. But like Alex said, it's agreed upon before they owe me the money. And then those policies are stated in my letters I sent out yearly, which included updates to my business, my charges.
Okay. Perfect. So, everybody who's joined us tonight, if you're getting on a little late, that's okay. If you missed any part of this, we'll be putting it up as a video on AmericanFarriers.com. But if you'd like to ask these guys any questions, there's a couple options. If you'd like to type it into the chat field, or if you'd like to type it into the Q&A field, both of those are on the Zoom toolbar. So feel free to type those in at any point, and we'll go through as many as possible. For our next question, a rate sheet, having a published listing of your prices, whether on your website or something you hand out. What's your thought on that, Shane?
I think honesty and integrity and transparency is very important to small business owners. And I always ran my business as though and treated my customers like I'd want to be treated as a customer. I talked to a lot of farriers, had a lot of different plans. They kind of had a floating rate, which, if they're a nice barn, they charge more than if they're at a junkie barn. I try to really stick to my policies. I definitely gave discounts to loyal customers and such, but I was pretty honest about that as well. If you're a customer for 20 years, you might get a little break. Or if you had, a 4-H kid babysitting, I think it's good financial responsibility and I try to help them out. But to have it down and clear and itemize, if you itemize for each thing you do, then there can never be a question, because we know a horse community is pretty small. So it could be a bit of a CYA, or cover your butt sort of thing. I had another point. I just lost it.
Okay. To add to that, do you think that it might be? I would find it would be beneficial to use in like a large barn setting, so that across the board everybody knows what the rates are. Small scale accounts. I guess you could let them know if they asked for it. But yeah, being upfront and transparent, I agree with you 100%.
I didn't publish it on my website. Early on, I did, and it kind of backfired. It's one more thing you have to update. Like I said, I sent out a yearly information letter to my clients, makes them feel more important, a little more personal interaction, and you can make, once again, your policies clear, your prices clear. Now I had a little bit different pricing structure. I had kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. I was really in touch with my numbers. I knew I broke down my numbers each year around tax time. So I knew what it was costing me to shoe horses and trim horses and replace shoes and figuring in my, my vacation leave and my benefits and such. And I basically had a flat rate. And then that also opened it up for me. I charged a little bit more than the other guys, but when it came time to put on bar shoes, I didn't have to discuss with the owner whether or not we're going to put, it's going to be extra $90 for a bar shoes. It was already fixed in what they've been paying. So I had a little bit different pricing structure. So it was easier to translate those fees to clients rather than hitting them. We all know pads are from a few bucks for a basic pad package with minimal packing to a size 5 foot that you're pouring into, it's all over the road. You can't
There's
just have
a lot of
set
variables
pad.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. Know your numbers. I think it's really important.
Okay. So let's get into a couple of topics that we discussed last week. I think you guys can give some different perspectives on this than maybe what Tom experiences with his practice. For some farriers, there's a concern now because clients may be out of work, dealing with other fallout issues related to the pandemic. What are your thoughts about giving price breaks or temporarily lowering your price, giving a wider window of payment, some different ideas like that?
I think it'd be a tough call. It'd be hard to manage if, there's options out there of setting up payment plans, but then you got to keep track of that. Maybe giving a discount, 5%, make them, you want to make them feel like they're appreciated and you're giving them a deal, but without breaking your bank. It's something we could look at.
What do you think, Shane?
Well, that's a tough one. Not one I fortunately had to think about working at the hospital. I get paid by the hour. So, and our clients, I know, don't get a break, but it's definitely an interesting question. And these are unique times. And with unique circumstances. And we experienced in 2007, 8, and 9 that during the recession, that was the first time I thought it was pretty recession proof. And a lot of people got rid of their animals then. Type of clientele I had, and I definitely saw a pullback. And I was giving breaks, and what I found is it hurt my bottom line. However, I think it made my loyal clients more loyal, knowing that I worked with them, and it pays its way back. So you have to be. I think some flexibility is warranted in this situation. As a general rule, I didn't give like multiple horse discounts and such on a normal, business setting.
Right.
A question that came in, Shane. How did your clients handle moving to a flat rate?
A lot of resistance at first, as you can imagine, because like I say, my rate increase is more significant than normal. Of course, the people there get more complicated packages. But once you explain to the client that through the horse's career, and that's when I was moving more into the sport horses, the higher end horses, when I'd given up trying to be a therapeutic farrier, and they know that the horse is getting injured at some point and they'll need something at some point, and to not be hit with the extra few $100 is really nice. And to kind of know, I actually got that idea from Steve Teachman. He had given a lecture once, and we sat down at lunch and talked about some business topics, and he basically said he had a flat rate, but it is what it is. And he said it could take the decision out of the client's hands, which is a huge one. Yeah, Alex, I don't know.
No, I don't have anything to add to that. It'd be something I'd be interested in looking at.
Okay. The other side of reducing your rate increases. Shane, you mentioned you do this once a year in a letter. When do you think is the best time of the year to raise your rates?
Go ahead, Alex.
No, I normally like to use it either after tax time or mid-year. But, that 5%, I don't know what your rate increase is, but normally it's 5% a year, give or take. That's usually notified because I sit down with a financial advisor, usually after tax time every year, and we go over a cost analysis of, what my business is doing at the time and rate increases and what it's going to look like in the future. So that's when I normally do it. Everybody's thinking about their money at that point in time, and that's when I apply it.
I think that's brilliant. I think that's when you know that your number's the best. I used to do mine around the holidays, it was kind of my slow season, and I got to sit down and write those things out. What I found is I had the most resistance because that's when everybody's paying for stuff. Everybody's kind of tightening the belt around that time. And so I moved it to June, July, once again, around tax time, and I always wait till the last minute to pay my taxes, though I prepped earlier. Was a great way to get associated with what you're going to need to raise your rates. And then you introduce it in April or May for a June increase. And I found that was a much smoother transition.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Do you ever reduce a rate for a specific service?
Why don't you go for that? Yeah. As bar shoes, I got to tell you, bar shoes is a great example. I use a lot of bar shoes. And with the inserts on the market today, I drop them in 5 minutes. I don't even charge extra for them anymore. I take that back. We do, but it's time and supplies rather than I'm charging less and less because it's taking me less and less time to do it. And technology is really helping me there with the different, different ways you can weld these things in. And that kind of goes with a lot of things. As technology evolves and cost of supplies come down, I'll absolutely rearrange my pricing structure to reflect that.
Yeah. Examples that I've thought of that might be helpful, like hospital plates. I don't charge the same rate for a hospital plate, put on first time, and then every time, either wrapped or reapplied. I normally won't charge the same as when first applied because the time for me to make it isn't there. So yeah, it's a time factor as well. If there's something that just pops in and out and we replace quickly, they do appreciate the little bit of cut costs at times.
Okay.
So let your margins stay consistent.
True. All right. We have a few more people logging in or logged in after we started. If you have some questions you'd like to ask, either type those into the chat field or you can type them into the Q&A. Both those options are available in the Zoom toolbar you'll see on your screen. Here's a good question. We'll ask this of you first, Alex. What do you think is the biggest business mistake you made in your career?
Not charging enough off the bat. When I first got started and what I felt I was worth, I should have charged a lot more. And, you think starting out that, I need to take the lowest price, and it's not necessary. You start out knowing what you're doing and should be able to apply the appropriate amount of what you're worth. Is one mistake I made, is not charging enough. Maybe also, not setting up a structure of business of how I want things to be in the future and just running with what's happening at the moment, if that makes sense. But there's probably a couple that I would say that I could have done better.
Okay. What about you, Shane?
Starting in the early 90s, I had thought I was being really smart opening a retirement account, an IRA early, and then that market crash hit. And I soured. And so the biggest mistake I did is not putting money into retirement early in my career when I was young. And when the market was down, just like right now, to continue to put in, I skipped a bunch of years and it could have grown. I could be comfortably retired right now. So save early, save often. I did not do that, and I'm paying for it now. Luckily, I'm a pretty good planner, but I could be so much better off.
Okay. Let's get into this. This is always a good question. What are your thoughts on specializing within a specific discipline or two versus having a well-rounded practice with a lot of different types of clients? Alex, why don't you take that first?
I I have had the opportunity to work on a lot of different types of horses and different disciplines. I think it makes you well-rounded working on different breeds and seeing different types of feet. You got a lot of other different challenges with different breeds. And I think with, working for different clients in different areas really opens your eyes to, how a hoof really works, but it works different in a lot of different breeds, is a comment I have. Shane?
You've hit something I'm very passionate about. I think it's very important to be, good at everything, but be really great at one thing or two things. You had mentioned, Alex, Western horses, what you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. But I think the key to specialization is realizing others have different specialties, and don't be afraid to refer to other farriers. For example, Frisians, or have a bunch of people on speed dial for when you're not well versed in it. I have a guy that I call, I now do a lot of Frisians. I never did one before. I avoided them. And I think that's what's missing in our industry is the comfort level to refer or ask for help in a discipline that may not be your own specialty. But once again, you should ask for those same referrals. If you're a hunter jumper guy and you don't be afraid to say, hey, I know what I'm doing here. Because a guy like me, they come into me lame. Once they're going back to work, I shoot to get them sound. I don't shoot them to work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
To add to that, Shane, I find it helpful when you work on all different types of breeds and types and disciplines. Me working in, a lot of the Western pleasure barns or cow horse barns that, sure enough, there'll be a thoroughbred in the barn and, thin walled, and being able to, thin wall, thoroughbred foot. Well, I've, worked on this before and I could deal with the thoroughbred foot, but then go right back to work on a quarter horse foot. It's so having well-rounded is helpful because, you never know what's going to pop up in any barn you're at.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you guys feel the same way about the size of the barns you work in? Like, having a sampling of a few large barns or down to maybe a few clients where it's a single horse. What are your thoughts on that, Alex?
On the question again, I'm sorry.
Well, in terms of managing a practice in terms of the size of barns, rather than maybe only working a couple of very large barns, what's your comfort level on the size of facilities you work, number of clients at one place?
You need to have some balance. Shane said earlier tonight that the backyard horses are your bread and butter. And so having a good handful of backyard horses and backyard horses in different areas is helpful to kind of spread that out. Big barns, they're nice and the money's good, but they can be very short term at times. And so really not limiting yourself just to do large barns, but really be open to have a mix of both. So if you lost a big barn, that you're not going to be hurt for money and you still have a handful of, let's say, bread and butter backyard clients that'll help support you, is I think really helpful.
I absolutely agree that big barns are great. And when you're thinking along in terms of, income produced and expenses, parking your rig at one stop all day is great for the pocketbook. Until they change a barn manager and the new barn manager has his own guy. You may not have done anything wrong, or I never liked barn politics. I never liked, barn gossip. And so the barns I did work in my own practice, I kind of just quietly snuck in and hid in the corner. I definitely preferred those 3 and 4 horse stops, but the trainers I really enjoyed working with and that I knew protected me and saw my value, and those are the barns I welcomed. And so, just like Alex said, I think having a well-rounded practice really balances things out for you.
All right. So Shane, your practice now, you don't do a lot of driving, but Alex, what are your thoughts on the amount of area you should cover?
It's case by case because you can cover a good hour on flat ground, no problem. But if you live in a hilly country or a mountain area, covering that hour distance might be a lot harder. It's case by case and what your, finances are able to do, because, you have added gas costs and added, maintenance costs. There's really not a number per se of what you work in. It's up to the farrier that, runs his practice, because he might be able to afford to live in one area, but have to drive, 2 hours to another area. It's really case by case and in the area that you live. That's a tough call. I probably go an hour each direction, but it's an easy hour. It goes by quick. And also too, remaining within the area that I can get to, problem horses or vet calls or, pulled shoes. You can get it to it in a quick amount of time is also helpful.
Yeah. I think there was a story we did back in November. Danvers child, farrier in Indiana, changed his, he had the typical circle, but, it's relative to where he lives with Interstate 65. And he would only go now to maybe 10 miles on each side, some short distance versus that circle. And what he was finding was he was losing clients because those guys far out on that edge of the circle, he would get to it tomorrow, but tomorrow never came. And now by doing that, he can hit them all on the way back. So yeah, it's certainly relative to anyone's practice.
I think this ties in very well with your specialization question as well. The more you want to specialize and the more you want to narrow your focus, the more you're going to have to be willing to travel.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question here. What about your pricing changes for resets? Same price, or do you change it at all?
I normally start with the same price. It's kind of that. It's an unsung rule that I just charge the same, and most customers don't mind. It's kind of an added tip in our pocket, like I say, which goes into a little quick topic of, that money saved on a reset could be money put into savings, or added into some, paying something off or et cetera. I charge the same. On occasion, we talked about, giving a discount. If you reset a shoe, well, you're able to, give them a little bit of a break, and I think they appreciated it. It's kind of that give and take, those loyal customers Shane was talking about, and giving them the little bit of a break is helpful.
What process do you guys have for vetting clients?
Shane?
A little different.
I got to take everything they send me now. Yeah. I never did draft horses till I did more draft horses in the last week than I did in 25 years before I came. But no, anytime referrals were very, very big for me, whether it was trainers or veterinarians or owners I trusted. Those were the clients I took first. If a new client cold called me, I asked some pretty specific questions along the way about why they're searching for a new farrier. How do they call me? If they heard that I did great work, or they heard that I really was knowledgeable in the subject, I was more apt to go with them than, well, you got tools, right? I just didn't want to be a set of hands and tools. I want to be known for my skill and knowledge.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that 100%. If a client calls, I usually ask where they refer, where you got my number. And it usually starts from there on if they got it from a reliable source or a trusted client or a vet, and then ask them, usually, I ask them, what type of horses do you have? What kind of riding do you do? And it starts into there, the conversation of, you can tell just from a phone call if, they're, for the most part, you can tell if they're going to be a quality client or a customer that, should be applied some effort to.
Alex, did you ever have a answer from a client that makes you run the other way?
Yes. I'm trying to think of some at the moment. Usually if they mispronounce the word farrier, if they say farrier wrong, or, my horse needs shod, but, the horse needs a trim, or, I think a lot of it's terminology that you kind of roll your eyes thinking, oh, this is going to be a fun one, or maybe I should just forward this off to somebody else. That's kind of question-wise. I can't think of some at the moment, but that's usually where it starts, is when, I want a client that, knows the horses for the most part, but knows, what my job is and what my job entails.
Okay. How much time do you spend per week on business-related work, your billing, your payment follow-ups, and your bookkeeping? Now, Shane, that again, that's probably different. I'm sure the hospital handles a lot of the business side of things for you now, but when you were managing your own practice, how would that work?
I spent about probably half hour a morning returning phone calls, making sure all my receipts were in order, running my aging report to make sure I didn't have anybody owed me any money. And then on Mondays, I'd spend probably 2 hours doing the week's financials and my bank deposits. And once again, make sure all the money's where it needed to be. So half hour a morning and a couple hours on Monday, and weekends off.
It might be a little less for me. A little trick that a farrier told me a long time ago was you spend 2 minutes at lunch and 2 minutes at the end of the day to return calls. And if there's no calls to return, you spend those 2 minutes calling a customer that has a horse with a problem and ask how that horse is. And that little bit of service goes a long way of just asking, how Fluffy's doing. So taking just 2 minutes out of your day. So, and I would say my evenings, maybe I spend 10 minutes sitting in the truck before I go in the house to wrap up my books, figure out my schedule, do any check deposits, all my, banking stuff I usually do once a week. Mondays or Fridays normally is where I do the money aspect of things. But so all in all, let's say, an hour a week is spent doing business paperwork, give or take. It depends on the week and how busy I am and et cetera.
I think that's a really great topic, is remembering this is a service industry, and those little things do go a long way for clients. What other tips do you have in that arena, Alex? I
always found clients that, with the service industry that are nervous or scared of something, or they don't know about a problem. It's most of the time because they aren't educated about it. So whatever fear they have, if you educate yourself on that fear, which there a lot can be the same, or a lot of clients have the same fear, educating yourself on and knowledging about that fear and kind of gives them peace of mind of, okay, I know my horse is taken care of, is a helpful tool I use of, just letting the client know what's going on.
Anything from your old practice, Shane?
Oh yeah, I got to tell you, use technology. It makes communication so much easier. You can stop and think about things. I really hate using telephone. I actually had in my outgoing message, if you really want to get back to you, text me. And you can organize your thoughts, and you have a record of your conversation, which can really help in a dispute. And much along the lines of what Alex said, the customer really wants to be part of the process. You're the expert. If they're asking a lot of questions, you might feel like they're questioning you, but they really just want to understand that the modern horse owner really wants to be informed. And there's so much out there that if you're not informing them, they're going to be informed somewhere else, and you may not want that. So like I say, with technology, it makes it really easy to communicate, educate them, just like Alex said, absolutely to what your plan is, what your goals are for them, and involve them in the process. Make them feel important in the process. And we absolutely do that at the hospital too. They're standing right there with us as we're discussing the case. And more often, and of course, the hospital sends out a lot of, how these guys do sort of surveys. And that's consistently what we see is they love being part of the process.
How do you set up those boundaries, though? Because technology makes us much more accessible, email or text, for example. But then that client wants to know a little bit more at 9 o'clock at night and doesn't want to wait till the morning. How do you set up those boundaries, Shane?
That was in my letter as well, that yearly letter, what my office hours are. My office hours, were 8 to 7. My business hours were 9 to 6. So if they want to contact me, they had that window of the 8 to 7. Outside of that, I'm not returning. And weekends, I don't return calls except for emergencies. I mean, we are self-employed. But I was pretty strict on that.
How do you handle those boundaries, Alex?
I think off the bat, what I do is, if I do get a phone call or text at 9:00 at night, it's not going to get returned until 8:00 the next morning. That's usually, and over time, clients get to know that they're not going to get an answer from me right away if it's past a certain time. Emergency cases is one thing, but on a random questions or small issues, they've kind of learned, I think, over the years of just he'll get back to me in the morning. So that's kind of how I've set it up. I haven't had a lot of problems with that, just for the fact of I just ignore the call until the morning. And I screen a lot of calls, which is helpful with technology to screen calls. But for the most part, they've learned that I won't get back to them till daylight hours.
You have to train them. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have time for a couple more questions. If anyone has a pressing issue, feel free to type it into the Q&A or chat fields there on the Zoom control bar. I knew this question would come up for you, Shane, working with vets. What advice do you have for improving your relationship with vets?
That's a great question. Learn how to speak vet. Ask them, demand their respect, earn their respect. And I think that's really important. Be knowledgeable in your field, and don't. And I have this issue all the time, still to this day. I overtalk. Sometimes just ask a question and shut up. You don't need to show your knowledge. and my mouth moves too much. And so the vet wants to work with the farrier generally. And the students we're pumping out are really, they have some really great questions. We did a Zoom meeting with a bunch of students today, and it was all in podiatry, and it was very engaging. So there is an appreciation for what the farrier can offer. It's just like working with the owner. You have to communicate with the veterinarian. Don't make demands.
Yeah. Shane, I want to add to that, I'm new to an area, so vets around here don't know me and know my history or what I'm capable of. I did make the mistake of, I get talking too much, and you want to let the vet know how much you know. But a lot of times it goes back into, I'll quietly sit there and listen, and throwing in a couple of vet terms to them, about the process, they'll really turn their head and pay attention to, this guy, might know what he's talking about. Not the saying just the words can do it, because the work will show. But being able to converse with the vet is helpful. And like I said, in an area that I'm new in, the vets don't know me. And so I'm just trying to establish myself. And it's little by little of just letting them know that, hey, I work hard at trying to understand your terminology. So let's work together.
Exactly. And terminology is so important. And instead of saying the inside or the outside, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to train yourself to speak in medial and lateral and dorsal and palmar and proximal distal. But it's not that hard once you learn to do it. And they respect that because that's how they speak. And it really helps.
Okay. Here's a good question from Tim Shannon, who helped us at the summit a few years ago with a great presentation with veterinarian Bob Grissel on this very topic. Tim asks, how do you handle a difference of opinion with a veterinarian?
This is important because it comes up quite often. We all know that now most vets don't have a ton of training in podiatry. Even the ones that do, just like farriers, have some very strong opinions on what they believe. So if you have a package, you need to be prepared to defend it. And the more actual evidence you have to back it up, a study that's been done on that particular package, or why you just can't say, I don't like wedge pads. You need to have some explanation as to why. It's not because my mentor didn't like it. It needs to be that this has been shown to, add stress to the, palmar area of the foot. But have some proof.
I think education is key, of just being educated on knowing what this shoe will do and knowing the cause and effect of it. I see that a lot with shoes that vets want applied, and being able to talk the talk and walk through them of this is what's going to happen to the foot. This is, my history with this, cases, bring up studies, being able to, just like I said, understand the foot and what's going to happen with what's applied. Either it's wrong or indifferent, just trying to find that common ground. It's frustrating at times. I know that a lot of farriers will, it puts the horse in harm's way, but you might have to do what the vet applies, but then they might start seeing, okay, that's not working, and then talk to the vet saying, look, this is what I feel really will work, and applying that, if it works or doesn't, but just, we each have an opportunity to put in our option or our opinion, is helpful.
It's so true, and you make a very good point. And if you're demanding they be flexible, you're going to need to be a little flexible as well. If they're proving their point, maybe you need to bend a little bit in your ideas as well.
Okay. What advice do you have if you do move to an area and trying to find clients, trying to build your books? Alex, can you take that first?
Yeah, so I started down in, like I said, Southern California, thinking that I was going to live there my whole life, and that's where I was going to stay. Life changed and things come up. Moving to the new area, I got lucky by building a rapport with other farriers. Was, I think, one of the most important things that I did in moving to new areas. Getting to meet, Shane, getting to meet other farriers up in this, in the area that could help build your business because they know you and know what you're capable of. I was able to fall into a farrier that was retiring, and the farrier knew me and knew where I came from. And so, all of a sudden just getting 30 head of, horses immediately just to keep me afloat was really helpful. So I think, working together as farriers, we all bend over for a living. So if we can all build a rapport between one another, because you never know when one guy's going to have to move to your area or away from your area, I found that that's probably most beneficial, is other guys in the industry.
Absolutely agree. Network. No farriers. Hang out at the local supply house, talk to farriers, go to clinics. That's where I met Alex. And then you'll start to build your business organically, because any good farrier in the area is already overbooked, and they'll start sending business your way, and then provide great customer service because word travels fast. Mm-hmm.
Okay, for a final question, and this is tied to something that really jumped out at me that you wrote recently on Facebook, Shane. I think one of the things we're learning in a difficult time that some farriers may be going through now is that we need better planning. And there's a thought as an independent business person that you don't have benefits, that's people in the corporate world. Shane, you got a completely different theory about this.
Oh, I got to tell you, and what I wrote down is one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'd heard it that morning, is in this time, it's really nice that you have some benefits now, not like when you're self-employed. I was like, when I was self-employed, my business took care of all my needs. Well, people don't understand that outside the corporate world that there could be benefits, it's my business. Just Westman Farrier Service absolutely provided me health care, dental care, vision care, retirement plan, vacation time, sick leave. It was all figured in to my pricing structure. And the point I made, another point I made in that same post was it was actually more flexible when you're self-employed. I'm stuck to about two choices now. Size has its benefits of the UC system is so massive that it has some really good benefits. But when you're self-employed, the world is your oyster. You can shop nationally for, let's say, a retirement account, who offers the best ways to go with the most choices. Right now, I get one.
Yeah. Alex, how have you set up your practice for long-term protection?
Long-term protection for me is, you got to, start with your here and now. You got to kind of protect yourself for the temporary, and then once that's protected, you look for the long term. I've started with covering myself from about 3 to 6 months of just if I were ever hurt, on top of disability insurance, but covering myself financially, that my bills can be paid for about 3 to 6 months. And that's comfortable. So during this time, you might need to touch it if barns are keeping you out, or et cetera. But long term, retirement. Shane and I could talk for hours on setting up retirement. That a lot of farriers out there think, oh, I'll never be able to retire. It's definitely possible. It's just you have to know the numbers and apply it accordingly. A lot of basic math to figure out what your costs need to be. But like I said, protecting myself, it starts with just 1 penny at a time. That down the road, when you aren't able to shoe horses, or something might come up, that you can be protected financially at least. A lot of guys have a secondary kind of their secondary job choice. Kind of keep that too, that door open is always, what can I do if I wasn't shoeing horses? That's something we all need to think about, because that last horse might be tomorrow. We just never know. So if we can get ourselves set up financially, and then with a secondary game plan, I think is beneficial.
Okay. We'll do one more question. I like this one. Farrier wants to know, what advice do you have to get to a better class of clients in your own local area?
I'd find it goes back to hanging out with farriers in that area. Get jump in their truck. Find farriers that are working on horses you want to work on, and say either apply yourself and jump in their truck. Be open to their style of shoeing, because that might be what that type of client wants. That I'd start there by farriers that are working in that industry. Get educated in that industry of whatever type of horses you want to work on. Know the terminology, from English to Western to gated, the gated community to the draft community. Know the ins and outs of it. I think is helpful.
Absolutely. It might sound like a pretty basic answer, but just like you said, to go sweep the floors for someone. You're not offering your expertise, you're gaining your expertise, and you will gain their trust. And then and you'll learn a lot along the way. And then once again, you'll kind of get those clients rolling your way. Also trainers, really important. Just like you're trying to develop a relationship with veterinarians, a cup of coffee goes a long way with the trainer. And if you're in their good graces, some really great trainers you're not asking for their clientele. Once again, you want them to think of you when they're looking for someone.
Okay. Well, I think this was a good balance between both your practices. I'd like to thank both Shane and Alex for joining me tonight, and everybody else for giving the questions. So terrific job, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Next week, we'll do this again, Thursday night, 8 Central. And the question of retirement will be a good one to approach. We'll have David Barron joining us, and David is a financial advisor based in the state of Washington, but he's a former farrier. So unlike someone who tries to make guesses about what you do for a living, he actually lived it. He was a CJF farrier until injury laid him up and forced him into retirement. But now he's back and helping farriers with business advice. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Shane and Alex, and everybody. Stay healthy, stay safe, and hope to see you here next week.